Hello, everyone. Erica here again, and I am with my friend Dan from Apex Odor and Disinfection. He's located in Commerce City, and he's got a lot of great info to give you homeowners and business owners. So, Dan, tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here, Erika. I really appreciate it. So just to kind of give everyone a basic idea of our services is we've been in this industry since about 2013, offering both disinfection, odor control, as well as allergen control services. And so we pretty much work across the entire front range to make sure that we're returning our clients' properties to safe, sanitary, and odorless states through the elimination of odor bacteria and allergens. We're OSHA certified and insured to operate in both residential and commercial properties. So we work with a lot of businesses, we work with a lot of homeowners. We also work with car dealers and also just, people that own cars that happen to have, say cigarette or any type of different odor, or they've had dogs in there for a long time. We also work in larger commercial settings like government offices, hospitals, food safe facilities, things like that. One of the things I like to explain to people is, we're big on making sure that our processes are effective, but also safe. So we're not leaving behind any sort of nasty chemical residues or anything like that. Um, and so, basically just to kind of give a simple idea of how our process works is depending on the situation, we'll come into, let's say, for example, a home, and we'll do either a vapor treatment and or a topical treatment, depending on the source of the contamination and the severity of it. And so our whole goal is basically to make sure that we're, in effect, cleansing the entire space. So, in the case of whether it's odor, at the same time as doing an odor control job, we're also doing a sanitation and disinfection treatment. And previously, disinfection was really only of interest more to our commercial clients, but especially given the current context of COVID-19, disinfection and sanitation is becoming more and more of interest to our residential clients. And so we do everything that we can to protect our community through our services.
Yeah, that's great. I was able to listen to Dan talk about his business the other week, and there was an awesome thing about cleaning the duct system. Can you just briefly talk about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So basically, with duct cleaning, a lot of homeowners, and it's kind of interesting because duct cleaning was never really something on anyone's radar until people started doing really effective marketing to convince people it was necessary.
Yeah.
But with standard duct cleaning, basically what you're doing is going through and scrubbing the ducts with, a lot of the time it's just a wire brush and a shop vac. There's some companies that use full on commercial vacuums, but the issue with that we found is that typically what happens is you basically disturb all of that particulate that's in your duct system, and then when you turn the fan back on, it basically blows all that particulate back out, which can a lot of the time exacerbate allergies. And so what we do instead is, rather than disturbing all of that material, which is pretty well adhered onto the sides of the ducts, we go through and we do a dry vapor treatment where it pulls the vapor through the entire duct system and effectively sterilizes the whole system. And so we make sure that that whole space, anything that's getting blown out over time, is actually safe and sterilized. And so that works both for disinfection as well as for odor control. And so one of the things we most commonly see is in the case of pets, we'll see pet dander, pet hair, things like that that get pulled into the duct system. And to some degree, it's just impossible to get all of it out. So instead, what we're trying to do is make sure that if someone's moving into your home that has allergies to those animals, we're eliminating those allergens.
That's awesome. And then I'm sure you see everything under the sun, but give us an example of something you've seen recently.
Yeah, so one of the more kind of obscure ones that I've seen, I'll give you a couple of quick ones. One that we run into really frequently is pet and smoke. Those are kind of the two primary that we run into. And so I'll give you an example of a situation where we actually had both. And this was, in fact, a hoarder house as well. So we had quite a few different factors coming into play. But the big ones that I really like to try to tell people, because this is an issue that we come up across frequently, is, let's say someone moves into a smoker's home, or someone has smoked in there for 20 years, they're going to sell their home and they want to try to eliminate that odor or kind of conceal it, right? And so they'll go in and they'll repaint their whole house, because as you smoke, the nicotine residue from that smoke gets sort of it builds a residue on your wall. And if you were to take like an alcohol swab and swab it, you can actually see almost like a yellow orange nicotine stain. And so what people do is they paint over it to cover it. But the issue is about a week to 2 weeks later, typically, depending on the heat and a few other conditions like humidity, that'll start to permeate through that paint. And it may not be quite as intense, but you still have a pervasive smoke residue odor. And so this is one of the things I like to educate people on is if you come across a property like that, please, before you go and paint over it, call someone like myself to come in and assess the situation and come up with a plan of action, because doing that work after the fact, what happens is you encapsulate all of that residue and all that contamination, and it makes it much harder to deal with after the fact. Another thing that we run across is like we were just talking about with duct cleaning. People will do carpet cleaning, duct cleaning, painting, all these different things to try to remediate things like pet odor issues, or they'll pull up their whole carpet, things like that. And so what we do is we actually come in and do a full inspection to determine, what we need to do to remediate that issue effectively. And rather than doing a ton of, demolition work and ripping up all your carpet, pulling up subfloor, we'll find a way to effectively handle the issue virtually in every case in under 12 to 18 hours versus having to do demolition and reconstruction. And so those are kind of the big ones. I'll give you a sort of unusual situation we ran into just this last week. Is we had a property down in Centennial where the homeowner, for about 2 years, she had run 2 Febreze plugins in every room. And what happens with those that's kind of interesting is basically when you run the Febreze plugins, it's almost like a fragrance impregnated into an oil, right? And it generates just enough heat to sort of vaporize that oil and disperse it into the air as a vaporized oil residue. And what happens is that residue spreads throughout the home almost like a smoke would, because it's heated, so it rises. It gets adhered onto your ceiling, onto your walls, into your carpet, onto your floor. It basically coats everything in a thin, oily residue. And so they had moved out almost 2 months prior, and the 30 showings they had, every person that came in said, look, it smells like a perfume store in here. I can't handle, it's almost giving me a headache. And again, like I said, it's almost 2 months after they had moved out. And so what we did is we came in and we did a full treatment. And this was actually a more difficult situation than I anticipated it being. It did take us about the full 18 hours to really get in there and take care of it. But in this case, immediately we had 5 showings that Monday after they came back in, right? We did the job on a Sunday morning all the way through to Monday morning. Had a showing at 2 p.m. The first people that came in said, man, it smells really like fresh and clean in here. And then the next 2 people had nothing to say about the odor. And that's what I'm always looking for, is for people to go from having significant complaints from multiple, either, guests coming into their home or potential buyers coming into their home, to then having no complaints whatsoever and it not even being an issue anymore. Because that's our thing, is we're not so much masking as we're actually eliminating and neutralizing. And so that was an unusual situation that I found myself in. But like I said, the big ones that we find are pet, smoke, are kind of the 2 primary, I would say, we run into.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure you see a lot out there when you're doing this, but I just
Yes.
think you provide such an amazing service to the community, to homeowners, to buyers and sellers. It just really makes an impact. And I know that you're fully insured and licensed. You said that earlier. And then we can roll in some of these costs into closing as well. So keep that in mind as well. But I want everybody to get your contact information. So go ahead and give them all your stuff so they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, sure thing. So our website is Apex Decon, DECON. You can find more information about us there. Otherwise, you can reach me at 303-900-0521. And I'm always happy to share information. I've had some instances where people are out in Grand Junction and they have an issue where it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to drive all the way out there, but I'm always happy to share information and kind of give people ideas of different ways to deal with situations. One I actually had recently, a gentleman called me out in Eastern Colorado that literally had a cat urine situation in an investment property where the residue had gotten down through the carpeting, through the padding, through the subfloor, and down into the joists. Wow. And so I kind of helped talk him through the best way to remediate that issue without having to do a tremendous amount of demo and reconstruction. And so I'm always happy to kind of chat with people and figure out, what's going to be your best plan of action to deal with these types of issues.
Yeah, that's great. And if anybody needs to get a hold of me to get a hold of Dan, I would love to get you guys hooked up. So thank you for your time today. That was a fun interview. All
Yeah, thank you, Erica. Always a
right,
pleasure.
we'll talk to you later.
Sounds good.